Adrian Miles stood in the center of the prison yard, his hands shaking as hundreds of inmates stared at him. It was the moment no one ever expected to see. A man who came into Rockwood State Prison as just another convicted felon was now standing in front of officers, teachers, and inmates, holding something no one inside these walls ever thought possible: a college admission letter. He had earned it from inside the prison. The yard, usually loud and full of noise, went completely silent. Guys who never respected anyone were now looking at him with wide eyes. Even the toughest men who survived years in the system, couldn't believe what they were seeing. When Adrian opened his mouth to speak, his voice cracked. This is for all of us," he said. Before he could finish, a loud alarm suddenly blasted through the yard. Beep, beep, beep. Officers started yelling. Inmates began running back toward the walls. Something was happening. Something bad. And in that moment, Adrian felt his stomach twist, because he realized this moment of hope was about to turn into a nightmare. And the reason why was walking straight toward him. A man he thought he'd never see again. A man who once tried to destroy everything Adrian had built inside this prison. But before we get there, let's go back to where it all started. Adrian Miles didn't grow up inside a prison, but he always felt like his world was closing in on him. He grew up in a small neighborhood outside Chicago, raised by a single mom who worked 2 jobs just to keep the lights on. He wasn't a bad kid, just a lost one. School felt like a place where he didn't belong. Teachers said he was smart but doesn't focus. Adrian didn't think he was smart at all. At 16, he dropped out. At 17, he fell in with the wrong crowd. And at 19, one bad night changed everything. A friend asked him to drive him somewhere, just to pick something up. Adrian said yes without thinking. He didn't know his friend had a gun in his backpack. He didn't know they were walking into a robbery gone wrong. And he definitely didn't know someone would get hurt. Adrian didn't pull a trigger. But he was there. And in the eyes of the law, that was enough. He was sentenced to 15 years. When he first arrived at Rockwood State Prison, the noise, the yelling, the metal doors slamming, it all felt like a punch to the chest. He didn't talk much. He kept his head down. But trouble inside prison doesn't wait for you to be ready. His first year was the hardest. He saw fights break out right in front of him. He learned the unspoken rules: don't stare too long, don't talk too much, and never look scared even if you are. But something changed one night. Adrian was sitting alone in his cell, staring at the ceiling, when an older inmate named Mr. Reeves stopped by. Reeves wasn't like the others. He didn't walk tough or act loud. He carried books, thick ones too. Math books. History books. Books most inmates never touched. "You ever think about finishing school?" Reeves asked. Adrian laughed. "Man, school wasn't for me." Reeves studied him for a moment. "Did you quit because you were dumb, or because no one ever showed you how smart you really are?" The question hit Adrian somewhere deep, a place he didn't know existed. That night, he couldn't sleep. For the first time, he wondered if his whole life had been built on a lie he told himself, that he wasn't good enough. The next morning, he found himself walking toward the small prison library. His hands were shaking. He felt embarrassed, like everyone was watching him. But no one cared. And for the first time, he picked up a book meant for learning, not passing time. That was the start. Within 3 months, Adrian was studying every day. Within 6 months, he passed his GED practice tests. Within a year, he became so good at math that other inmates started asking him for help. But the more he improved, the more one man began to hate him. A man named Rico Barnes, someone who thrived on chaos, not change. Rico didn't like seeing Adrian turn into someone others looked up to. He didn't like the influence Adrian was gaining. And one afternoon, when Adrian walked into the library, Rico was waiting for him behind the shelves. Adrian didn't see the punch coming. He hit the floor hard, his head spinning, books falling everywhere. Rico leaned down and whispered, "Stop this school stuff. You're making people think they can be better. That's bad business in here." Adrian wiped the blood from his mouth. And instead of quitting, he went back the next day. That choice would change everything in the prison. But it would also bring him face to face with Rico again, in a moment far more dangerous than a punch in the library. A moment that would shake the entire prison. And that moment was seconds away. The alarm kept screaming across the yard as Adrian froze in place. Officers were shouting. Inmates were backing up against the walls. The air felt tight, almost like it was shaking. And then Adrian saw him, Rico Barnes, walking through the chaos like he owned it. Rico's eyes locked on Adrian's college letter, still in his hand. His face twisted with anger, the same anger Adrian had seen in the library. Only this time, it was different. This time, Rico looked like a man who had nothing left to lose. Adrian felt his heartbeat thumping in his ears. An officer yelled, "Everybody back. Move to the fence." But Rico didn't move. He stepped closer. One step, then another. Adrian tried to back away, but two inmates behind him blocked his path. He didn't know if they were with Rico or just stuck in the panic. All he knew was that Rico kept coming. "You really think you're better than us now?" Rico hissed. "College? In here? You think you're special?" Adrian swallowed, trying to steady his voice. "I just want to help people learn." Rico's jaw tightened. His fists clenched. And for a moment, Adrian thought this was it, that all the work, all the studying, all the hope he built was about to be crushed in seconds. Then something unexpected happened. Mr. Reeves, the older inmate who first encouraged Adrian, stepped between them. "Rico," Reeves said calmly, "this isn't the way." Rico glared at him. "Move." Reeves didn't. For a second, the entire yard felt frozen. Even the officers seemed stuck, trying to figure out where the threat was coming from. Rico raised his hand like he was about to strike. But before he could, an officer rushed in, grabbed Rico's arm, and slammed him against the fence. More officers swarmed in. The yard fell into chaos again, inmates shouting over each other as officers tried to regain control. Adrian stood there shaking. The letter nearly slipped from his hand. He looked at Reeves, who gave him a small nod, like he was saying, "Keep going. Don't stop now." The yard was cleared, and everyone was forced back into their units. Adrian walked silently, his legs weak. His mind was spinning. He wasn't scared of Rico, not anymore. What scared him was how close he came to losing everything he had worked for. Back in his cell, he sat on his bunk and stared at the wall. He didn't open the letter again. He didn't need to. Just holding it reminded him of how far he had come. But that night, something unexpected happened. Two younger inmates knocked softly at his cell bars. "Hey, Miles, one sit. Is it true? You really got into a college program?" Adrian nodded. The second guy looked nervous. Can you help us study too? We heard you teach." Adrian felt his chest tighten, not from fear, but from something close to pride. For the first time, he realized he wasn't just learning for himself anymore. Other people believed in him. Other people needed him. Over the next few weeks, more inmates started showing up to the small library room. Adrian taught reading, then writing. He made simple worksheets by hand because they didn't have printers. He turned empty tables into desks. He asked officers for old notebooks and broken pencils. He even convinced the education officer to bring in extra books. Slowly, something unbelievable happened. The prison started to change. The noise in the unit calmed down. Fights became less common. Inmates who used to argue all day now sat quietly with pencils, trying to understand fractions or paragraphs. Officers noticed it too. One of them even said, "Whatever you're doing, keep it up." Adrian didn't feel like a convict anymore. He felt like a real teacher. Months passed. His little classroom grew from 2 students to 10, then 15. Even inmates from other units asked to join. But not everyone was happy about the change. One evening, just before class, an officer pulled Adrian aside. "Rico's back in the unit," the officer said. "He's been asking about you." Adrian felt a cold weight settle in his stomach. Rico had been in segregation since the yard incident. Now he was back, and he hadn't forgotten. That night, after teaching, Adrian walked back to his cell. The hallway was quiet. Too quiet. He could feel someone watching him. When he turned the corner, he saw Rico standing at the end of the tier. The same cold stare. The same anger. But this time, Rico wasn't alone. 3 other inmates stood beside him. Adrian froze. Rico stepped forward. "You really thought it was over, teacher boy?" Adrian didn't move. Rico smiled, a slow, dangerous smile. And then he said the words that made Adrian's blood run cold. "Tonight, we end this."